As you may already know, the Scarlet Crusade left a bunch of pamphlets back in BFA on how they plan to infiltrate the Alliance, how they're hiding the true heir to the throne of Lordaeron and the Menethil bloodline that artists had also hidden that they will install once the traitor Anduin is removed. Well, Anduin is gone. In 10.0.7 we're getting a new Scarlet Crusade cosmetics out of nowhere in the trade post. Even more interestingly, right now the Alliance is ruled by REJOINS, who is a Lordaeron nobleman, a fanatic to the light, doesn't really like undead, and he was time traveling when all the Scarlet Crusade atrocities happened. Furthermore, there are heavy hints of Gilneas being restored in the near future, as well as Lordaeron and a potential revamp of the old zone. So could we legit see a faction of the Scarlets joining the Alliance, representing Lordaeron, and actually being playable? Guys, before we get into the video, I want to show you guys something super cool, and that is the Ridge wallet. I've been using it for years. It's super simple, super sturdy, and super slick. You can put cash here, you can put up to 12 cards. There are so many designs you can choose from, and recently they also started making key cases that can really match with the wallet. Now, if you use my link in the description below, you can get a really great discount, so make sure to check out the Ridge wallet and click the link below. The Scarlet Crusade is a really weird thing when you really think about it. I mean, technically, they're some of the worst and fanatical enemies that we have faced off against, but when you think about it realistically, they are actually the good guys that eventually got super radical due to events that were largely out of their control. I mean, technically, the Scarlet Brotherhood, as they're called now, or the Scarlet Crusade, are literally the Knights of the Silver Hand, the soldiers of Lordaeron that rightfully so defended their kingdom from an invasion unlike anything that ever happened in history, and they vowed to defeat the undead and free their homeland. While of course they're trying to remove undead that are also former Lordaeron citizens, we can't really make the argument that the Forsaken have been in the right either, or the Forsaken are the good guys. Sylvanas, as we had learned, was working with a dead god trying to destroy Azeroth, and she literally blighted Under City and just did a whole bunch of bad stuff. The Scarlet Crusade, on the other hand, started out really as a noble cause, similar to the Argent Crusade, and they had a bunch of paladins, really noble people, but over time this cause really degenerated. When you think about it, this wasn't even why they turned evil, it was multiple things that really compounded into the outcome that all of us know. First, they definitely had some bad apples in the ranks that drove the fanaticism, but they were also infiltrated by dreadlords that created chaos that resulted in even further chaos. Now, when you tie this in with all the frustration as they accrued a lot of losses, they weren't at all successful in removing the Forsaken, and instead they just kept losing ground time and time again. Then they started becoming more and more radical, and even those that weren't as fanatical started turning into the bad guys. Now, over the years we had faced them off mainly as this fanatical cult, and they lost a lot of their leadership, if not the entirety, because we don't really even know who is currently leading them, and they have really just been thrown into obscurity. As far as we know, when the Fourth War ended back in BFA, the Scarlet Brotherhood was formed with a new ideology where they wrote a bunch of propaganda pamphlets stating that they plan to infiltrate the Alliance, that they really don't like Anduin and they do like Genn, and that also apparently they have an heir to the throne of Lordaeron. Now, all of this is already old and stale information, but most recently a lot of things changed even in Dragonflight. First, we literally just got 10.0.7 trade post all of a sudden. Scarlet Crusade cosmetics were data mined, which could be a hint that they're still relevant and that Blizzard is actually thinking about these guys. They weren't just left in the past. I mean, just remember how when Blizzard works on expansion, they always like to include assets in the current one, which is why we got some Dragon Mouse in Shadowlands. We speculated that the expansion would be related to dragons, and you know, we have Dragonflight. However, more importantly, the political situation changed drastically since BFA. First, Anduin is no longer a king, he is missing. Second, Calia Menethil is now one of the Forsaken leaders, and she actually plans to restore Gilneas and to give it back to the Alliance. Even more importantly, REJOINS is currently the leader of the Alliance, and he is like the perfect Scarlet Crusade guy. First, he likes the idea of restoring the old Alliance. Even more importantly, he is literally a Lordaeron nobleman, which means they would instantly respect him. He was a Knight of the Silver Hand, a paladin like much of the Scarlet Crusade, and most importantly, since he has been gone, he has been really missing out on a lot of Scarlet Crusade atrocities, so I could totally see him being sympathetic to their cause. So let's look at some of these pamphlets that we have and what the goals of the Scarlet Brotherhood actually is, and let's look at all this stuff in a lot more detail. I'm not going to cover everything because there really is a lot to unpack, but let's really quickly summarize what their goal is. I mean, keep in mind, a lot of these propaganda writings could and more than likely are actually just straight out misinformation, but the gist of it is that they really do not like Anduin. They see him as a traitor to the human race. They know he attempted to make peace with the Forsaken and they despise him because of that. On the other hand, the Scarlet Brotherhood likes Genn, but in terms of liking him, it's more like they kind of see him as a means to an end. They know Genn has a bone to pick with the Forsaken, that he really doesn't like them, but at the same time, the Scarlets don't like the fact that he's a Worgen, and they see him and his kin as not really all that much better than the undead, and they want to get rid of them. Their goal is to get him to accomplish their goals, and then to ultimately discard Genn and just get rid of the Worgen. Now, most interestingly, out of all these pamphlets is the so-called Last Menethil. Apparently, even before, when Arthas was alive and when he was young, his sister Calia had a child with a nobleman of the Arati bloodline, but Arthas hid this child until he could start his own heir. Since the Scourge and the Lich King happened, he never actually got an heir, so apparently, according to the Scarlet Crusade, they have the child the actual heir to the throne of Lordaeron, as legit as Arthas, and they know his location, and of course it is secret. They apparently plan to reveal this child soon once the traitor Anduin is exposed, and they say that the Menethil dynasty will be restored. Now, keep in mind, I'm not really sure how blood tests work exactly in the Warcraft universe, but this could and more than likely is just a straight out lie. As far as we know, Calia Menethil actually has a daughter, but honestly, I think if this entire writing was true, this would make for a super interesting storyline. First, because this son would probably be 15-20 years old, so he could totally become a legit king, and we could get like a new artist type character. However, the most important point is that this story happened in BFA, and since Shadowlands, a lot of things changed. First, the traitor king they plan to remove, Anduin, is actually gone from the throne. Most importantly, there have actually been quite some changes around their base operations. Calia Menethil, that the Scarlets don't like because she's like a half undead, is now a Forsaken ruler, and she managed to reconquer Lordaeron. Second, as there was a time skip, approximately 5 years had passed since this point, which is a really long time in the Warcraft universe. The Alliance and the Horde have been at peace, and as far as we were told back in Shadowlands, Calia is in secret talks with Genn, and she plans to convince the undead to remove themselves from Gilneas. Now, even more interestingly, Blizzard in a blue post said that in regards to storylines like the retaking of Gilneas, they plan to make it as a questline we could play through, strongly hinting that this might actually be something they have planned in the very near future. This just by itself changes the nature of the hostility of the Scarlet Crusade. Back when the Forsaken were just outright trying to eliminate the Alliance, the Scarlets would have been a great ally, and Genn could have been used as an entry point because he also wanted to restore Gilneas. Now, if Gilneas is back and the Alliance is right in the northern part of the Eastern Kingdoms, they don't really have all that much of a choice. I mean, what are they going to do? Attack both the Horde and the Alliance? Or are they just going to remain as this band of cultists for all eternity that they're just gonna lose more and more? As far as we know, they barely exist at this point, and they don't have much of a way of expanding themselves, so eventually they would just disappear. So, in my opinion, there is actually a very likely scenario that we could see the Scarlet Crusade actually joining the Alliance, and all of this could be a part of a big revamp of the entire continent. We could see Gilneas back with the Alliance, the Forsaken getting their own land, and the Scarlet Crusade getting their own lands as well, which could of course become Alliance territory, and Blizzard already confirmed they no longer plan to have faction conflicts like they had in the past. Now, that is cool and all, but you may be thinking, but what about this fanatical side of the Scarlet Crusade? In my opinion, I think this could all be a part of a future expansion, and it would really all depend on the context. The Scarlet, despite being villains, are not actually just outright evil demons. I mean, they're just a lot of just and noble warriors and paladins that have really been at the whims of these fanatics that control the Scarlet Crusade, plus the dreadlords. So I could totally see them splitting and a part of them joining us and us helping them free themselves from these fanatical guys. Of course, the Scarlet Brotherhood is a joke at the moment, so definitely this wouldn't be an entire expansion worth of content, but if we get like a Void or Light Invasion or whatever, they could go crazy in their fanaticism and ally themselves with the invaders. I think the biggest factor that could win over the Scarlets to the side of the Alliance is the fact that, as I said, a Lordaeron nobleman is the ruler of the entire faction. I'm guessing some of them know Tyrellian personally. He's even more fanatical in terms of the light than some of the Scarlet Crusade, and Tyrellian is also not exactly a huge fan of the undead. This could of course lead into a possible villain arc as well, but who really knows what could happen at this point in time. However, this could be a really interesting thing to happen, and seeing how iconic the Scarlet Crusade is, it would be cool to get them as an allied race. I know they're not exactly all that different from regular humans, but some storyline could happen with them, maybe even getting Lightforged Scarlet Crusaders, depending on what the next expansion is about. Thank you for watching. Check out Queen Ashar's returning Dragonflight by clicking on the screen, and check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real-world history. See you next time!